Hey, sweetheart, you dropped something or just your leg? The voice snapped through the humid air like a whip. Laughter followed, sharp, cruel, echoing off the steel beams and concrete slabs of the construction site on East 6th Street in Austin. Danielle Hayes didn't respond. She didn't glance sideways. Her pace never changed even as the mocking whistles rose behind her like a cruel applause. But her grip on her bag tightened, her jaw locked. She kept walking. Behind the safety of the chain-link fence, a group of workers stood leaning on metal scaffolding, smirking and elbowing one another. One made a limping motion with exaggerated flair. Another cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, "Wrong turn, war hero." The VA's that way. And across the street inside a dusty gray pickup truck, Logan Price sat frozen. His coffee trembled in his hand. Not from shock, from memory. He hadn't seen her in almost 5 years. Not since that scorched night in Kanpar, when their convoy hit 2 IEDs and Sergeant Danielle Hayes had crawled through flaming wreckage on one leg to pull him and 2 others to safety. She'd lost her left leg that night. He hadn't seen her since the medevac lifted her away half-conscious, still barking orders to keep everyone alive. Until now, and now she was being laughed at, mocked by men who couldn't carry her pack for 5 minutes, much less survive what she had endured. Danielle had no idea Logan was watching, or that he had already pulled out his phone, or that a storm was coming. Because 5 minutes earlier, she'd simply left the VA clinic like she always did on Thursdays. The sun was brutal, the sidewalk cracked and unforgiving beneath her prosthetic. But Danielle never took the easy way home. She said the walk helped her think, helped her forget. She wore her Marine cap proudly, her shoulders squared. Her stride was steady, deliberate, even if the metal limb beneath her jeans clinked faintly with every step. To most people, she was just another face on the street. To others, like the men behind the fence, she was an invitation to mock what they didn't understand. But to Logan Price, she was a hero, and in about 10 minutes, those construction workers were going to learn exactly who they had laughed at, and who had been watching Logan Price was out of his vehicle before the laughter even faded. He crossed the street without hesitation, his boots silent against the concrete jaw, clenched eyes locked on the construction site like a man approaching a battlefield. The men mocking Danielle Hayes were too busy enjoying themselves to notice the former Navy SEAL moving with lethal calm. But the second he reached into his jacket, phone in hand, the air around him seemed to shift. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He simply hit a number labeled Bravo Team and spoke with the gravity of war. "This is Logan, code Sierra 5. Send 3 SUVs to my location now," he said, voice sharp, clipped, urgent. "Danielle Hayes is being disrespected, publicly, and these idiots don't know who they're mocking." Then he hung up and turned his attention back to the scene. Frank Delgado, the foreman, was still chuckling with his crew. "Bet she parks in the veteran spot and expects people to thank her," he sneered. "I should charge her for the shade she's standing in." Laughter again. Another worker mimed a limp. A few clapped. Danielle didn't turn around. But her hands were shaking, not from fear she'd survived far worse than a crowd of cowards, but from the weight of injustice that seemed to cling heavier than her gear ever had in Afghanistan. And Logan saw it all, saw her trying to disappear, saw the pain she refused to show. He didn't hesitate. 12 minutes later, the sound of tires screeching onto asphalt snapped the silence left by her departure. 3 matte black Chevrolet Suburbans pulled in front of the site like synchronized shadows. The engines cut simultaneously. The doors opened in one swift, rehearsed movement. 7 men stepped out, not in uniform but unmistakable. Combat boots, faded tattoos, quiet purpose. The laughter died instantly. Logan stepped forward as his team formed a loose but imposing line behind him. His voice was low, but it carried. "Which one of you thinks it's funny to mock a Marine who lost her leg protecting this country?" Delgado looked up, startled. "Who the hell are you?" Logan's eyes narrowed. The man whose life Danielle Hayes saved when an IED took her leg. The man who watched you humiliate her for a sacrifice you'll never have the guts to make. Delgado tried to smirk, but it faltered. "It was just a joke. It was cowardice," Logan interrupted, stepping closer. "And it ends now." Behind him, SEALs shifted. One Tariq Bell pulled up a live video feed from a dash cam across the street, already recording. Another James Reed scanned the site for security cameras. It was methodical, precise. A mission, not a brawl. We've documented everything Tariq announced. The words, the mocking, your faces. Delgado's crew began to backpedal. One man dropped his coffee. Another looked at his phone as if willing the moment to disappear. You think mocking someone like Danielle makes you tough? Logan asked. She dragged 3 of us out of a kill zone under fire, bleeding from her own wounds. You wouldn't last 5 seconds in the world she survived. One worker stammered, look, we didn't know who she was. That's the problem, Logan said sharply. You didn't care. The silence was heavier than any concrete they'd poured on that site. Reed stepped up next. We've already sent this footage to Morrison and Ford Construction Group, your parent company. A formal complaint time-stamped and tagged with your foreman's name. You're all about to learn what consequences feel like, Logan added. And no, this isn't cancel culture, it's accountability. Delgado's face turned gray. This is insane. You guys can't just show up and wrong again. Logan cut in. We can. And we did. Because Danielle Hayes is family. And you don't mock family. 2 SEALs walked toward the front gate, calm, professional. One spoke briefly with a bystander who had started recording on her phone. Another collected the name of a witness who had overheard the entire incident from the taco truck nearby. You'll hear from the company's legal team by morning, Reed said flatly. Delgado dropped his hard hat and cursed under his breath. But Logan wasn't done. He stepped back, eyes scanning the men who just minutes earlier had laughed at a war hero. Danielle didn't say a word to you. She kept walking. That's more strength than any of you showed all day. One of the younger workers, maybe no older than 22, stepped forward hesitantly. I didn't laugh. I mean, I was here, but I didn't say anything. Logan's eyes softened just slightly. Then be better next time, because silence isn't neutral. It's permission. And with that, Logan turned toward the road. Mount up. The SEALs fell into line back into the SUVs, the doors closing with quiet finality. No cheers, no violence, just a message delivered loud and clear. As the black vehicles disappeared down the road, the construction site stood paralyzed. For once, the pounding of hammers had stopped, and in their place, only the echo of shame remained. And Danielle Hayes. She still hadn't turned around. But miles away, sitting alone in her small apartment, her phone buzzed. A message from Logan. Just 2 words handled. Family. And for the first time in a long while, Danielle allowed herself to exhale. Master Chief Ryan Calloway's voice was steady but cold. We recorded everything. The words sliced through the thick silence that had fallen over the construction site like a blade. The 7 Navy SEALs standing in full view of the stunned workers were no longer just witnesses. They were now evidence collectors. Calloway lifted a small, body-worn camera from his vest and tapped the screen, which displayed a frozen frame of Tom Riley pointing and laughing at Danielle Hayes just minutes earlier. You mocked a Marine who lost her legs saving American lives, he said, directing his stare at Riley. And you did it loud enough for the whole damn street to hear. Tom Riley's face turned a shade paler as his eyes darted to the men around him. Construction workers who had joined in the laughter now shifting awkwardly, unable to meet the SEAL's eyes. What had seemed like harmless fun moments ago now felt like a ticking time bomb. Logan Price stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Danielle. His voice was low but thick with fire. That's the woman who dragged me out of an ambush in Helmand Province. I was bleeding out. She was already hit and still came back for me. You humiliated her in broad daylight, and now you're going to answer for it. Danielle didn't speak. Her hands clenched at her sides. But her eyes, fierce, unblinking, spoke volumes. I didn't know, Riley stammered. It was a joke, that's all. No, said SEAL Brent McAllister from the right flank and arms crossed tightly over his chest. That wasn't a joke. That was cowardice. That was ignorance in steel-toe boots. As murmurs spread among the remaining crew, Master Chief Calloway made a call. This is Calloway. Patch me through to Morrison and Tate's regional director. We have an immediate breach of conduct on site, and I have video proof. Within 5 minutes, Calloway handed the phone to Riley. The foreman's hands trembled as he held it to his ear. Yes, sir, he said, his voice cracking. Yes, it's all true. No, I didn't know she was a veteran. Yes, I understand. Yes, I'll pack up my things. He lowered the phone and handed it back, defeated. "I'm terminated," he mumbled. "Effective immediately." Logan didn't smirk. He didn't cheer. Instead, he nodded once and stepped aside. But the storm had only just begun. Calloway pulled up the footage and airdropped it to a local veteran advocacy group's media liaison on site. "This isn't about vengeance," he said quietly. "This is about justice, about respect. Let the country see what happens when you mock those who have bled for it." By the time Logan helped Danielle into his SUV and the SEALs dispersed, the footage was already online, posted first to the Brotherhood Rising account, then picked up by the Texas Veterans Coalition. Within an hour, it had over 400,000 views. By nightfall, it crossed 8 million. The title was simple and searing: "She lost her leg for this country." They laughed. Comment sections exploded. Thousands of veterans flooded the post with their own stories of being stared at, whispered about, dismissed. Parents of service members chimed in. Even Hollywood veterans and retired generals reposted it with their own statements of outrage. Local Austin News ran the story on their primetime broadcast, featuring freeze frames of the construction crew, blurred faces, and a bold headline, "Veteran humiliated by crew SEALs intervene." National outlets followed by morning interviewing bystanders and reporting that Morrison and Tate had not only fired Riley, but suspended 5 others pending internal review. They released a formal apology and pledged $250,000 to support wounded veterans. But for Danielle Hayes, the public reckoning brought more than media frenzy. It brought something deeper: validation. She sat on her modest apartment balcony that evening, scrolling through messages. One from a woman in North Carolina read, "My husband came back from Kandahar with one arm. Thank you for standing tall. You reminded us we're not invisible." Another read, "My son wore a prosthetic through high school. He watched your video and said, 'She's not broken, she's badass.'" Danielle exhaled tears, threatening her composure. For so long, she had endured in silence. Now the silence was broken not by her, but by truth recorded and released like a spark into dry grass. Logan called late that night. "How are you holding up?" he asked. She chuckled softly. "I feel like I've been hit by a tank and hugged by 1,000 strangers. So, weirdly okay." "You're not just a story now," Logan said. "You're a symbol, whether you like it or not." Danielle looked out over the Austin skyline, the hum of traffic blending with the glow of news choppers above. "I don't want to be a symbol," she whispered. "But if someone else walks down the street tomorrow and doesn't get laughed at because of this, then maybe it was worth it." And somewhere across town, another veteran watching the footage for the 5th time nodded slowly, finally feeling seen. The viral storm that erupted from the video left Danielle Hayes reeling. She hadn't asked for any of it: the headlines, the interviews, the flood of messages from strangers. In the days following the incident, her phone buzzed nonstop. Journalists wanted quotes. Veterans organizations wanted endorsements. Social media was ablaze with hashtags like #Honor Danielle and #Not in Our America. Her inbox overflowed with apologies, praised job offers, even threats. And yet, through all the noise, she felt hollow. Danielle sat quietly in her apartment blinds, drawn prosthetic leg propped on a pillow, her Marine Corps mug untouched beside her. Her eyes stayed on the muted TV, which replayed the footage she now knew too well. Her own limp, the laughter, the shame, and then the calm fury of Logan Price and his SEALs stepping in like ghosts from a different time. She turned it off. The knock on her door came softly but firmly. It was Logan. He stood on her porch, cap in hand, eyes steady but gentle. "Didn't mean to drop in unannounced," he said. "Just wanted to check in. And thank you again for Fallujah, for everything." She let him in without a word. They sat in silence for a while before Logan finally asked the question neither of them had dared to voice. "What do you want to do with all this?" Danielle exhaled slowly, watching the dust dance in the afternoon light. "I wanted to disappear, Logan. Just be left alone. But maybe that's not what's needed right now." His gaze met hers. "You think it's time to speak?" Danielle gave a small nod, her voice firming. "Not for me. For everyone who walks like I do. For those still getting laughed at, ignored, dismissed." And just like that, a new mission began. With Logan's help and the backing of several veterans groups, Danielle agreed to speak publicly, not to be a symbol, but a voice. She began with local town halls, then larger forums. At first, her hands trembled when she stepped behind a microphone. Her voice cracked. Her eyes avoided the cameras. But what she said landed hard. I'm not a victim. I'm a Marine, and my limp doesn't make me weak, it proves I kept going. Her message spread like fire through veteran communities. Schools began requesting her to speak. Police academies and HR departments reached out for training sessions. Her story wasn't just one of survival, it was a call for change. Then came the invitation from the National Veterans Advocacy Conference in Washington, D.C., a gathering of military leaders, policymakers, and thousands of veterans. Danielle hesitated. She paced her living room for hours the night the invite came in. Speaking on a stage was one thing. Doing it on the national level, that was something else. She didn't feel polished, didn't have a degree in politics, just scars and truth. Logan stood by her side. You don't need polish, he said. You've already got everything that matters. So she flew to D.C. 3 weeks later. She wore her dress blues, sharp and clean, her prosthetic shining beneath the hem, her medals pinned properly, her nameplate firm over her heart. As she stepped up to the podium, the lights seemed to press in from all directions. Faces blurred, cameras flashed. A crowd of 2,000 sat before her, including senators, generals, students, and one small boy in the front row with a prosthetic arm who watched her with wide, curious eyes. Danielle steadied herself. I didn't come here to make anyone feel bad, she began. I came because silence helps no one. Not the veterans missing limbs, not the ones missing peace, not the ones who never made it back at all. A beat of silence. I lost my leg in Afghanistan, but I gained something too, a promise, that I'd keep fighting for those who couldn't anymore. And when those construction workers mocked me, they didn't break me. They reminded me why I wore that uniform in the first place. The audience leaned in. This isn't about politics. It's about dignity. It's about how we treat people who've given parts of themselves for this country, whether it's a leg, a mind, or their time. She paused, locking eyes with the boy. Real courage doesn't always come with medals. Sometimes it limps through a crowd of laughter and keeps walking anyway. The room erupted, not just in applause, but in resolve. In the weeks that followed, Danielle's speech was replayed across the country. Clips appeared on national news podcasts, military forums. State legislators introduced bills mandating veteran sensitivity training in public agencies. Schools launched Respect Our Warriors programs. Employers updated HR manuals with specific guidance for disabled veterans. Danielle had never intended to lead a movement, but when the world shoved her into the spotlight, she didn't flinch, she led. And from the shadows, Logan watched with quiet pride. He didn't want recognition. Seeing Danielle claim her space was enough. She had pulled him from a kill zone once. Now she was pulling thousands out of silence. The Marine who once walked alone was now marching at the front of something bigger than herself. The legacy Danielle Hayes sparked didn't fade with the headlines. 1 year after the day she was mocked, and the world responded, the Hayes Foundation was not only thriving, it was leading a quiet revolution across the country. With a staff of former service members, social workers, and volunteers, the foundation helped disabled veterans access employment, legal support, and mental health services. But more than that, it rewrote the national conversation on dignity. Danielle now stood behind a different kind of podium, not as a survivor seeking justice, but as a leader shaping change. She traveled state to state, meeting with business leaders and lawmakers, pushing for inclusive hiring practices, disability accommodations, and veteran sensitivity training. Her presence was calm, her words simple, but they carried weight, and people listened. Major corporations adopted new policies inspired by her foundation's model. Hiring programs for disabled veterans soared, while company HR departments invited the Hayes Foundation in to teach seminars rooted in lived experience, not corporate jargon. Even local governments requested her input for community initiatives. But perhaps the most unexpected change came from Tom Riley. The former foreman, once the face of public shame, had taken a different path. After his termination, Tom had vanished from headlines, but not from accountability. Quietly, he began volunteering with the Hayes Foundation, first in logistics, then in outreach. It wasn't redemption by declaration. It was earned brick by brick. Now he led sensitivity training workshops himself, standing in front of construction crews across the country, telling them how one bad decision nearly ruined his life and what Danielle's strength taught him about real respect. Danielle never once asked for an apology. She never needed it, because her focus had always been forward. The small boy who'd once watched her speak in D.C. now wrote her letters each month. Veterans who had stayed silent for years now told their stories aloud. And Logan Price, the man she had saved on a battlefield long ago, continued to walk quietly beside her, not as a protector anymore, but as a friend who believed in the mission they now shared. Danielle Hayes never sought the spotlight, but by walking through mockery with her head held high, she became a symbol for everyone who's ever been underestimated. And that's a story worth remembering. If this story moved you, let it live and leave a comment, share your thoughts, and subscribe for more true inspired stories of justice, resilience, and quiet strength. Because in a world full of noise, sometimes it's the calmest voices that echo the longest.